Serie A Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Serie A Chronicles podcast. I'm Mina Rzouki and I'll be your host for today. And as always, I'm joined by Nicky Bandini, who's still in America, but she's coming back today because I think they've had enough of her now. She's been there for a really long time. And we also have a special guest, but before we get to him, because we are so excited and thrilled to have him on, I just wanted to ask Nicky quickly about her trip to Arizona. Everyone settled in, baby, back in the house?
Oh, it's been so nice, Mina. That was before the last show, wasn't it? Yeah. So my friend gave birth to her first baby. So I got to be not there for that, but in town for that. So that was a really, really lovely moment. And then I didn't stay in Arizona because I think, lovely as it was to stay with them, to sort of be there when they're sort of nesting and just got first baby arriving would have been too much. So I've gone on to see some friends in San Francisco. And contrary to what you might think, Mina, about people getting sick of me, yesterday, a stranger told me my accent was beautiful. Beautiful accent, they
was
said.
It?
So I would like to stay here, actually, and just have that forever. But apparently I have to come home, so.
Oh, Nicky, I also want you to be there and pay for your healthcare. But anyway, that's enough chit chat for today.
Yes.
We are really very excited to introduce someone else because maybe you guys have gotten a little bit sick of Nicky and I always talking. And we have the almighty Patrick Kendrick. Now, Patrick is the lead Serie A football commentator on the World Feed, making him the voice of Serie A in the English-speaking world, regularly heard calling Serie A matches on televisions around the world.
They've done it in style in Reggio Emilia. The Rossoneri Renaissance is complete. After 11 years, once again, Milan are the champions of Italy. It's they who wear the crown for the 2021-22 season.
He's also an interpreter specializing in football, as well as a reporter for UEFA and BT Sport. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you very much for that introduction. Yeah, I feel a little bit sheepish now after that, but there you go. Thank you very much. It sounds much grander than it actually is day to day. It's not nowhere near as glamorous as it sounds.
I think that goes for all of our jobs. I think anyone who sort of has an idea from the outside about what journalism looks like covering sport, it's great, not complaining, but it's probably not as glamorous as people imagine ever, is it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
yeah.
Especially not when you're staying in hostel sometimes, but yeah, sure. The start of your journey is like, pittance, but we do have you, Patrick, so thank you so much for joining us. And you did quite a lot of games over the weekend. But just before we sort of head into that, I guess there's like a burning question that I always want to ask commentators, and I feel like a lot of listeners would probably ask this too. How did you end up becoming a commentator, especially one that's now we hear every week as well, calling a lot of matches?
It's a great question. I think every journey is unique. I'll try and give you the abridged version, else we might use all of our allotted time on my potted CV, which is probably not the best for your listeners. It was something that just came to me as a sort of notion when I was in my teens. I really wanted to do it, and then a few near misses here and there, and I actually started out doing audio description for the RNIB, the Royal National Institute of the Blind in England, and then went from there to did some watch and bet back in the day in Perform in Feltham in West London, and eventually I always say the big irony of my career was I became pigeonholed in London as someone commentating in Italian. So I had to move from London, where I was commentating in Italian, to Milan to be able to commentate in English, which is a little bit counterintuitive. So there we go. And it's just developed from there, really. So yeah, no, it's been great. It'll be 10 years in July in Milan. Yeah.
Wow.
Is that where you're based, Patrick? Because I get the impression, maybe it's just because this season there's been lots of good reasons to, but I get the impression you're in Naples a lot as well.
I am. It's very perceptive of you. Yeah, for not just for work as well, for personal reasons. I go down to Naples quite a lot, which is pretty handy this season as well, because it's just been the most incredible campaign, and it feels like it's already done and dusted, the title race. I know we'll get onto that, but because it's Napoli and because it's been so long, I think it's amazing. Any other team, if it were those years of Juventus, no offense to Juventus, Mina, by all means, but if it were Juventus during that 9-year dominance, I think if they were this far clear at this stage, then everyone would be feeling a little bit jaded. However, I think because it's Napoli, it's 33 years and neutral's choice. I think everyone is just dazzling in sort of the afterglow, and everyone feels a part of it, even if they're not necessarily a Napoli fan or Italian or from Naples. I think everyone is really buying into what they're doing. Yeah.
Actually, Patrick, just one last question. Just because it has been a really exciting Serie A for the last few seasons, because we've just had different winners, right? So we've had the Juventus dominance, then we had Inter, Milan, and possibly now Napoli. Fingers crossed. We think it's in the bag now. But is there a favorite team? Have you decided to start liking someone a little bit more? Is it like, Plucky Salernitana, who seem to never get it right? Or, is there a particular team that you just love commenting on, or you've become a little bit of a fan of?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of an occupational hazard to pick favourites, but you do naturally get swept up in it. I would completely agree with that. I think Salernitana were the story last season en route to that incredible survival. I'm a big fan of Empoli, but always have been every time they come up to Serie A. I love the way they do things, the way they develop young players, the fact that they're, the provinciale per eccellenza, the small town team par excellence. I was looking yesterday before the Fiorentina-Empoli game. Their population's 49,000. Empoli is actually in the province of Florence, which I think is a great story in itself. So I do like clubs that try and play football a certain way. I'm not saying the right way, a certain way. And I like teams that develop talent from within, and then we go and see them flourish elsewhere. So Empoli are one. But I also like what Monza are doing as well, leaving aside any political affiliations or otherwise. And, obviously Berlusconi does divide opinion, but I think what they've done in pure footballing terms and the story of Galliani going home to Monza and being involved in that after 3 decades with Milan has been really good. And, my vision of things might be slightly clouded by the games I've just done this weekend, because I did both Monza, Milan and Fiorentina, Empoli. But those are two sides that stick out. And naturally, when you're looking for a story, it tends to be those smaller teams as opposed to the established group of clubs, I would suggest. Yeah.
So definitely not an Allegri fan. Right. Okay.
It's just Mina on Allegri Island.
No, we can get onto him by all means. The much maligned Max Allegri, I tend to agree with you. I think he gets a bad press, to be honest. I don't think he's anywhere near as bad as everyone make out. But yeah.
Actually, I remember that on Twitter right before Christmas, you were banging the drum for you watch out, Juventus are going to get into this title race. And I think that's pushing it too far, which it is. But you were right, actually, because without the points penalty, they'd be second.
Well, there's a spoiler alert as well here. I actually went to a bookies. I know everyone bets online these days. I don't know if I should even be talking about gambling on a family show, but there we go. I actually went to a bookies, and with cash, not even with my card, I put, 20 quid on Juventus to win the Scudetto. I think I would have.
No way!
Yes, on Christmas Eve, no less, in my hometown of Winchester. And as and when they went into that game away at Napoli, and I think they were 8 behind, weren't they? They could have gone 5 back before the 5-1 rout. I was a little bit gleeful with some of my colleagues, and then it all came crashing down, I think, a few days.
Don't you worry, Patrick. You have a home here. I'm kicking Nicky off. She didn't even think they'll make top 4. She was like, they're not going to be top 4. They're not going to win. Don't be ridiculous,
It's true.
And Patrick, you will now be the host and everything you want on the show.
Wonderful. Fantastic.
Bye.
Okay, let's start off with actually the games that you want to talk about. The games that you commentated on. And obviously we do have to, I think, start off with the leaders. Great game on Friday. They have obviously a great Champions League match coming up against Eintracht Frankfurt, who also plays some really good football. So there's going to be a really exciting matchup. Hopefully we can see Napoli's dominance just like we saw against Sassuolo. I thought it was interesting afterwards that Dionisi came out and said, well, if we had Berardi, it would have made the difference. And then you do feel that with Sassuolo, it's not the Sassuolo of old, the one that still shocks you. They're still capable of some brilliant play. Loriente, personally, is one of my favorites to watch. But, I mean, Kvaratskhelia and Osimhen, I just feel like there are no more superlatives. It's a tragedy if we lose these two next season.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what Patrick was just saying about like, because it's Napoli, because it's 33 years, it's still going to be exciting to the end. And I agree because it's going to be a huge party when it happens. And it is a win. No one doubts they're going to win the league now. It's going to be a huge event. But I still feel like between now and the end of the season, there's going to need to be a moment. There's going to have to be something. And I was thinking back, because I can always draw a link back to Arsenal, as Mina knows. I was thinking back to 2003-04, which was the invincible season, but Arsenal lost to Chelsea in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. And I remember immediately after that loss, before we knew it was going to be an unbeaten season, feeling incredibly hollow about the whole season because Arsenal were playing so well in the league and it looked pretty likely that Arsenal could win the league. And now suddenly there was like nothing exciting left. It was just like, okay, so they'll probably win the league. But actually then they came back and they had this game against Liverpool where it looked for a minute like they were going to implode. Like Liverpool got on top of them at Highbury and it was like, oh God, like what if everything goes wrong now and they don't even win the league? And then Henry turned on and scored the goals and they won 4-2. And it felt like that moment became quite iconic. Now, I hope for Napoli's sake that they won't end up with that same story of going out of the Champions League that early. Of course, just winning one round in the Champions League knockouts is going to be making history for Napoli because that's not a thing they've done. But I'd like to see them go really far in that competition because I think they can. But I think either way, I think it'll just happen. But I'm yearning for them to have a big game, like someone really sort of come and push back on them, give them a tough game, unlike Juventus, and then them come through it. Because at the moment, it does feel like it's just a sort of pleasant stroll. And I mean, yes, in Kvaratskhelia's case, literally a pleasant stroll through the entire Sassuolo team before scoring the first goal at the weekend.
Just astonishingly good. I mean, you're absolutely, it really struck me what Mina was saying there. It's a cliche, isn't it? Running out of superlatives. But actually, it is becoming a challenge on a weekly basis because Osimhen is scoring every single week. And so, you don't just want to revert to the numbers, but inevitably you do because you have to. And that's part of the job. And he's now got his sights on Immobile and Higuain's record of 36 goals in a single season.
It's different goals every week as well, though, Patrick.
Yes,
it's different goals.
Yes.
It's not the same goal every week.
Rahmani. Osimhen working the channel. Osimhen. He's got a wonderful goal. He's caught everyone off guard there, Consigli included. And Napoli have doubled their advantage.
I have to thank him for my worst goal call of the entire season, which was the one against Sassuolo, because I started to say he's got, and I was about to start listing the players in the box, and he caught me and Consigli and everyone inside Mapei off guard and just decided to fire it in from an improbable angle. So I thank Victor for that one. And but yeah, I mean, there's just a freshness to his game. It's very instinctive, and it's just an absolute joy to watch. I saw this graphic the other day on social media. It's comparing all of these, Napoli trios down the year. And obviously the most recent one was when Sarri converted Mertens into that false nine role and they had Callejon and Insigne, which was great because, that allowed them to get Mertens in the team as well as Insigne. If you remember, initially it was Higuain and sort of Insigne and Mertens jostling for position. Then there were the three tenors as well, with Cavani and Lavezzi and Hamsik. But I think for me it was just absolutely it's two now. It's not really a third. I mean, Elmas has been sort of the little brother, sort of just trying to muscle his way in, but their understanding is out of this world. And it does feel slightly selfish, but I would like to see them stay in Naples for several seasons. I don't know how long. My hunch is Osimhen goes this summer on the basis that this is his third season already. I think De Laurentiis would be loath to lose them both in the same summer, because my hunch is you can't necessarily replace Osimhen and his goals, but Kvaratskhelia is the one you need to keep at least for another season, allow his market value to grow, and maybe like you did I'm talking from a Napoli perspective, as the club did in 86, 87, and then in 89, 90, don't just win one Scudetto, try and win another one, if not the year after, then at least within a few years. So my hunch is Osimhen might go this summer, but Kvaratskhelia is probably here to stay. I hope we at least get another season out of him, because I feel like one of the most privileged observers at the moment, because I think they're probably, along with Haaland, they're two of the most talked about footballers in the world.
I guess as well with Osimhen, there's at least some sort of alternative. Like, you have got Raspadori there waiting in the wings. You have got Simeone as well. Like you can imagine a world in which the team is still pretty successful without him, even though, of course, not as good, because he was out early this season and they did still win games. So
yeah, and that's been the story of him. Absolutely, yeah. Sorry, just saying that's been the story for all 3 seasons he's been there. You know, the first season he dislocated his shoulder, the second season he broke his cheekbone, then he had this hamstring injury, and finally we're seeing him week in, week out. But Mina, I don't know about you. My feeling is with Napoli now, either they go out in the last 16 or they make it to the Champions League final. I think it would be very Napoli. It's all or nothing. A bit like, you know, they've only lost 1 game. They've won 20 and drawn 2. I feel like either they go to the final and maybe win it, or they go out now, and a bit like they did with Cremonese in the Cup.
It's weird with Napoli because I think that, I mean, it's certainly the best team in Europe right now. I really can't figure out a team that plays better football than this. But they have this, Osimhen, for example, it was somebody that I felt like at the time really had to play sort of, you know, all guns blazing, firing from all cylinders, throwing himself into every challenge. You know, that's why I almost felt like he was injured all the time. Andy Brassel once said that, you know, he worries about him because of the way he plays his football. He's just all or nothing. And yet now what you see this year is the technique that shines through. So he doesn't need to rely so much on everything else. It's just this perfect control, the ability to score from the tightest of angles. His mentality as well is one that will always seem to push him further and further, which I think is such a blessing to have. Kvaratskhelia, I think, is, you know, wearing 77, talking about Real Madrid endlessly. You kind of know where it is that he wants to end up. And if it's not there, then I think he'll stay. But Lobotka would be the guy that I would love to have. That guy for me, I mean, I've just never seen a man who can dictate an orchestra so beautifully. So he is like, wow, as well. I just don't even know. I mean, they could do it without Zielinski. They can do it, you know, it's just everyone there, you never think to yourself would be who they are. But the one thing that still worries me about them is the defense. And I just kind of feel like if you do sort of come at them vertically and counterattack, I mean, one of the abilities of them to have such a good defensive record, I think the best in Serie A, is the fact that they hold possession so much. But what about if they are up against a side that is, because we've seen even against Juventus in which they trashed them 5-1, there are always moments in which they look a little bit shaky, just like if Loriente had managed to score or I don't know, Berazzi was there. You feel like I sometimes think to myself, if they're up against an Mbappe, PSG is terrible, but Mbappe, can they stop him?
And they're not up against an Mbappe in the Champions League, but, you know, Frankfurt have got Moani's having this great season,
yes.
Really sort of sharp counter-attacking player.
Exactly.
They have got Lindstrom as well. And I think Frankfurt will lean into that. If you overcommit against us, we're going to hit you fast. And we've got players who can run with the ball.
Precisely.
I think there's a banana skin here for Napoli. And I think it's going to be really easy to look at that and go, oh, it's Frankfurt. It's not Madrid. It's not Man City. And I think they've lost one of their last 11 games, Frankfurt. They're playing well. I think it's a dangerous game.
And how many times have we seen in the past a team carrying over, winning the Europa League into going very deep, if not winning the Champions League as well? We've seen that in the past. So yeah, I think this is the one. And history plays a part as well. The fact that they've never made it to a European Cup or Champions League quarterfinal is a consideration as well. There's something in that. And I remember the last time Frankfurt came to Italy, it was against Inter, and Spalletti was Inter coach. And admittedly, he had a very strange situation to deal with then. It was just after he'd stripped Icardi of the captaincy, I remember, and he gave a debut to 16-year-old Sebastiano Esposito in the second leg. But and Luka Jovic scored, which is even more surprising as well. Oh God,
so, that was many years ago.
You know, it was a different time then. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I had already preempted that they'd get over. I do like Eintracht Frankfurt. I'm still not sure about their defense, though. So I feel like Napoli could do I guess, going forward in the competition, because I still think they should reach the final. This team should reach the final. But let's move on to another team who actually has a Champions League clash this week, rather. And that's Inter against Udinese. They started off slowly. I don't know what you guys think of handing them the decision. I think the penalty was really fair, but then they obviously got to retake it because Lukaku missed on the first occasion. And I don't know about how you feel about that, but it doesn't really matter.
That you said it that way, because he missed on the first occasion. Like, the decision was, okay, you can have another go because you missed.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that was what it was, though, you know? It was like, oh, poor Lukaku, just give him another chance. He did score in the second one. Yeah. And thank God he got that goal, because, you know, you just kind of need Lula back, right? And this is the first time that they've scored together since the Conte days. it wasn't a great first half for Inter, but I thought it was a great second half from them. And it's interesting to see the rotations. The player that they once depended on was, the players were Lukaku and Brozovic, right? And now you sort of rely on the Çalhanoğlu's and Mkhitaryan and actually, it is Lautaro Martinez always, I mean, Porto is a side that terrifies me. It really, really terrifies me. Sergio Conceição, I mean, they've had such a field day with Italian teams. Knocked Milan out in the group stages, obviously knocked Juventus out in the knockouts. Sergio Conceição and Simeone Inzaghi are like such, they're good friends. They played together, obviously. And Conceição is one of those, sort of Italian-minded coaches who really studies the opponent. But this was a good Inter side. So are we hopeful?
Yeah. I don't know, Mina. I mean, Lukaku, to me in this game, and of course you mentioned Lula, they actually weren't on the pitch at the same time. They sort of traded up, but Lukaku was on at the beginning with Dzeko. And actually like building up to that penalty that they got and that he scored at the second attempt, it was him who sort of put the cross in beforehand that created the penalty. And there was something about the movements, something about the sort of the run down to the byline that gave me like a flashback to a couple of years ago when he was there with Lautaro. But it was all happening like in slow motion. I got this horrible analogy in my head, which I'm sorry for if I'm going to make you all suffer, which is like, have you ever seen those videos of like horrible videos of like when a fish or like some other seafood has been like cooked and it's on the plate, but it's still like giving some of those twitches like it used to do when it was still alive? I felt like that about Lukaku. It was like he's not really the same Lukaku he was before. He's just sort of got something in his central nervous system that's still propelling him to do the same motion. Because he looks nothing like the player who dominated Serie A. I'm just being honest about it. He's plodding. He's slow. He's not that player. He was so good a couple of years ago. I was all aboard the Lukaku train.
You really were.
And to me, he doesn't look like it right now. To me, anyway. I don't know if Patrick disagrees.
No, I think you're right, and part of that has been, I think, the emergence of Lautaro as well. It's, it was Lukaku was the senior partner, and they played very well together. But I think now Lautaro's just on another level, and age is clearly a factor, and I think wear and tear as well. Lukaku has a massive frame. He's going to turn 30 this year, and he's been playing at the highest level since he was a teenager. So I just do wonder how much his body has had to take, getting a serious injury, having had a good run without them. We've seen it with Pogba. We've seen it with Zlatan. The later you have that big injury, the harder it becomes to then come back from it. So I do wonder. I really hope we can see the best of him again. But it is concerning because it's not at all the same player that was so dominant, and maybe Serie A defensives have also figured out how to handle him, don't leave as much space in behind, don't allow, mark him very tight, touch tight, or have a second defender in the vicinity who can then help you double up. But you remember how many times in those 2 years under Conte, he used to just receive the ball back to goal, either roll someone or lay it off, and people would be running beyond him. I hope we can see it again because, I'm pretty much of the same opinion with you that unfortunately it's, they talk about minestra scaldata, don't they? Don't heat up old soup, basically. And I think we've seen that was the story for me, really, of all season. It's the microcosm because everyone was excited about Lukaku and Pogba too. Pogba hasn't kicked a ball. Lukaku scored, I think, 3 goals across all competitions, including this one, which was a penalty. And Kvaratskhelia, who no one knew anything about, has just burst onto the scene. So I think that's a very sort of simplistic take. It's quite reductive, but I think there's something to that as well. Yeah.
I mean, personally, I do think Dzeko was pretty bad in this game too, so it's not really helping. But I do, and Lukaku was also the one who gave away the equaliser to Udinese in that.
Yes.
But personally, I think we're seeing the real Lukaku. The one I saw under Conte for me wasn't the real Lukaku, but I've never been high on Lukaku. I've kind of always said that. But I think that when you are a player who is in a formation that's made for you and bettered by obviously having you as your focal point and playing to your strengths, which I think Conte did really well in that in a way, and it was in my view a little bit simplistic, but it did the best for what you had at the time, which was the best Bastoni, a great Lukaku, obviously like the likes of Perisic eventually in the second season because he wasn't there the first time. But here's the thing, I do genuinely believe that any player that plays under Pintus is a star, okay? Because there is just no way that Luka Modric at like 935 years is still managing to do what he's doing. And that's because so much of his time has been under Pintus. And having him, having Lukaku in such amazing physical shape, amazing conditioning, and also a fitness coach who exactly understands his sort of biology and what is required to bring out the best in him on a physical level, on a conditioning level, certainly helped. And then he would feed that information to Antonio Conte and work together to create a plan to get the best out of him. I think without that, then we don't see the best of Lukaku, because he's not necessarily the most... He's sort of a focal point that needs to be your focal point and designed a team around him. Otherwise, for me, I feel like without that combination of a perfect fitness coach who feeds the information to a coach that will do all you can to get the best, I don't know if we'll see the true Lukaku back. And it's kind of just like that with several others, by the way. It's not just on him. I do think, again, like if you take away Pintus from Real Madrid, I'm not entirely sure that they would have won all their Champions League. But I think that it's important to note that this is the same man who has gone on and won or taken so many teams to Champions League, including the likes of Monaco. So there's something to be said about having those two guys in charge that made Lukaku who he is. But I don't know if we'll see that level again, because I just don't know if anyone ever reaches those levels in general.
I think fitness for him in particular, I mean, I think it's like a broad point you make that's true, but I think fitness for him in particular has always been like this key thing, because he has had periods before in his career, even when he was quite a lot younger, at Manchester United, for instance, people were saying he's too heavy, he's too slow. And when he was at Inter last time around, he was leaner than this, or at least he looked lean like this.
Much.
He moved differently. And I think that extra weight, it just feels like there's a tipping point with him where it makes it really hard for him to be as explosive as he wants to be.
Fingers crossed, because I think they had a great second half in
Kalulu's cross, Origi. Junior Messias! What a bullet! Di Gregorio got a hand to it, but it's a thumping finish from the Brazilian. And finally, Milan break through.
Milan, though, 3 wins in a row. Check them out, doing the whole cortomuso.
This is your dream, Mina. Like, this is your dream. You've taken an exciting team that won the league and you've made it boring but effective. That's your dream. That's what you want.
This is exactly what I would do. And credit to Pioli to just cull it, to stop all of it. Listen, they were just conceding so many goals. They just went back to basics and thought, you know what am I going to do? I'm going to be inspired by, the people that came before me. The great Allegri. Let's do a 1-0 victory and get it through. And what I think is so funny is Gazzetta like, look at him, look how wonderful he's doing. Meanwhile, stupid Allegri. And I'm like, yeah, you're not at all biased, but sure. Having said that, I think there's a lot, the defense is doing a very good job. They are missing so many, not missing so many players, but still without the great Bennacer, who I think is the difference maker. But Monza, you got to feel sorry for them. And then there's a part of me that was like, are they happy with this result because it's Milan?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit disappointed by some of the pre-match comments there. Galliani said it's us against us, which if you're not a...
Yes! What was that?
Yeah, if you're not a Milan or a Monza fan, I think if you're probably one of Milan's top 4 rivals, hearing that and then seeing Milan win the match is probably, you're just opening yourself up to allegations of X, Y, or Z. And Berlusconi went even further and said, Milan's my boyhood team. I supported them growing up because I used to go with my father Luigi. And whilst I'm fond of Monza, they don't have the same place in my heart. This is someone who's the owner of Monza, who's basically saying that he's fonder of their opponents that weekend. So I found those comments a little odd, but that's what makes Italy so great, and that's what we love about the fabric of the Italian game is the no filter. I talking about it off air with Massimo Paganini, who was my co-commentator, and he just said Berlusconi's got no filter, and I said, yeah, that's probably about right. So I realise that's my second reference to him today, so I should probably move on. I think 2023, that was their first loss for Monza, and I think they're a little bit unlucky because there's that effort from Churiya, hit the post, then hit Tatarusano's head, and hit the post again. Yes. And it really reminded me of the Aston Villa Arsenal game. One for you there, Nicky, that I was watching earlier on in the game when it smashed off the lovable head of Emi Martinez. I mean, it couldn't have happened to a nicer person, really. But, I think Tatarusano, deserved a lucky break, given he's been just hammered by all Milan fans. So, when things are turning, when things like that, it hits the post and goes out. But I like it back to basics. You realise, lest we forget, for all Milan's great football last season, in patches with Leao down the left and Teo there as well. It did come down to that defensive solidity at the end. 9 clean sheets in the last 11, they only conceded 2 in that time. So, it's the old adage, defences win championships, and it's never truer than in Italy. And so I think he realised something there. I think it would have taken a lot of pride to say, actually, we're going to move from playing this attractive brand of football, 4-2-3-1, pressing all over the pitch, lots of interchange, these fullbacks pushing in field, to actually say we're going to go to a back 3 and we're just going to try and start to grind out results and keep clean sheets. And the derby, the first half of the derby was one of the most depressing Milan displays in recent times.
Really was.
But it's now bearing fruit. If they go through against, they can draw away at Spurs and go through to the Champions League quarterfinal. You talk to their fans, that's their natural habitat, playing in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, they're able to qualify for the top 4. In this exceptional season, Pioli has been saying for 2 months now that what Napoli are doing is exceptional. So he's basically been trying to exonerate himself of any responsibility for Milan not defending their title. And probably doing quite a good job of it, to be fair. But I think everyone is very quick to say how Napoli are the exception and their form is the rule. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think we're still going to have quite a low tally for second place this season if they keep up this. But Monza will be top 10. I can comfortably say that. I think Monza are one of the best top 10 teams in Serie A.
That thing about Galliani and Berlusconi, obviously their story is particular, but I feel like there's a very Serie A-ass thing in that, because do you remember Giorgio Squinzi, the late Sassuolo?
Yeah, what is that? Why are they all Milan fans?
He used to have a Milan phone case. And when they were getting ready to be promoted to the top flight in Serie A, someone asked him, if Sassuolo played Milan, who will you support? And he said, I have no doubt I'll support Milan. His own club that he owns, cheering against them against Milan.
You know what I think is so funny is that how many of these guys are just happy to be like, yeah, we're all just Milan fans. And then I'm just like, hello, how is this happening? Because, I put a bet on this. Again, family friendly, sorry guys, but I put a bet on you, Monza. You ruined this for you. So I was a little upset about that. But what do we think of the new defensive lineup for Milan?
I really like Malik Thiaw.
Well, Malik Chow. Yeah, absolutely.
It reminds me of how Kalulu came in last season, Patrick. When the sort of the injury to Kjaer happened and Kalulu comes in alongside Tomori and becomes this revelation. It almost feels like Thiaw is his first forced situation that's working out really well for them. Because I think he's had a few really good games in a row.
Yeah, I think he's well suited to that back 3, and I think they needed that sort of physicality. And he's got a good eye for a young player, Pioli. And not just sort of throwing them in desperately, waiting the right time. There's been all this clamour, and he's consistently said, took Tonali to his second season, took Leao to his second season, took Brahim to his second season. We saw it with Kalulu as well. And I've been impressed. I've been impressed with Chow for sure. The great enigma remains CDK, but I just feel so sorry for him. I just want one to go in and.
Oh my God, against Tottenham, that was so tragic. Because it was the best chance, but you knew. Well. You were it was perfect, and you knew he wouldn't get it on target.
2 games in a row, he's had such near misses that you just know this is a psychological block. You just know. And it's so painful to watch because you can feel you can see his suffering on full view, I still think he's a brilliant player. So I really hope next year he explodes if he doesn't do so at the end of the season. Patrick, I feel like we've taken up a lot of your time. I've just looked at the time now. Thank you so much for joining us and for giving us your input on the matches that you've commentated on and obviously just in Serie A in general. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about how we can hear from you, more of our fans if they want to follow you?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Patrick Kendrick. Albeit with 1K in the middle, you'll be able to find me. And anyone watching Serie A highlights on YouTube, that's all us via the World Feed. And if not, if you're in one of our territories where matches are shown with the World Feed commentary, then yes, you can hear me on 3 games a weekend normally. So thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed the chat.
I hope we can see you again.
I just want to add quickly that if anyone's listening to this and thinking, oh, that's interesting, Patrick pronounces a name differently to how Nicky or Mina pronounce it, Patrick's almost certainly right with the pronunciation and I'm getting it wrong.
Absolutely. We are absolutely wrong.
Potato, patata. I'm glad we didn't get onto that because I try and I'm conscious of the fact I need to be consistent throughout. So, but yeah, I don't think it's a big deal at all. So, I think that's the beauty of languages and different ears and pronunciation. And absolutely, Bella ciao. That's what I like to think of him. Malik ciao, Bella ciao. So
Bella ciao.
Bella ciao. Thanks, Patrick.
My pleasure.
Okay, so those three games were covered. Fiorentina Empoli, I feel like, deserves a mention there because it's starting to get a little bit tragic. I don't understand how this team can work as hard as they can and still not get it through. But I do think Empoli is a very good team. The good news for Fiorentina is that they scored 4 goals against Braga, were brilliant in the Europa League. I guess the question is should they have sold Amrabat?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an extremely difficult start to the year, hasn't it, for Fiorentina? They've won 1 game since the start of 2023, and the last 6 games they've taken 2 points. It's going very much in the wrong direction at the moment. And I agree with you about Amrabat. I couldn't quite work out what the market for Amrabat was because we talked about him, didn't we, on the Sky Sports transfer show, Mina? And I thought there was going to be so much more people sort of working to get that signing. Yeah. And I thought even at the time, like, he'd been good for Fiorentina, but I never felt like I'd seen him play at the level he did at the World Cup. So I thought it was a good time to sell. But looking like that window maybe not as open as it was.
Barcelona coming from at the end, I thought in my head, like, I would have definitely sold him. Even though I kind of understand their reasoning for it, which they didn't have enough time to find a replacement. But the guy was playing on injections in the World Cup. He was so injured, in so much pain, and he was doing it for his country. And there was a lot of talk about it. I mean, even from the coach at the time, Walid Regragui. So knowing that he was coming back, it was always going to take a really long time for him to get back into full fitness. And you're right. I'm never sure that we're ever really going to see that play, at least not this season, you know. Mm-hmm. So perhaps good time to have cashed in, and maybe he would have needed a new motivation in general. You wrote about Lecce destroying Atalanta for the second time in a row. I mean, if there's one team that you can sort of bang on this season, it's Atalanta doing an impressive show. And yet, Lecce know how to stop them.
I just think Lecce are a fun story. We've already talked about Monza, who, of course, I think we've mentioned a bit more just because of the Berlusconi factor, because there's been a lot of money poured into them. Lecce are like the total opposite. You know, they got promoted to Serie A. They've got the lowest wage bill in the division, and like a quarter of the wage bill they do have, by the way, is on like Samuel Ntiti on his own. So they're still, even with that, the lowest in the division. And they've, I think, out of 27 players that have played for them this season, 16 had never played in Serie A before. So some of those had played in the lower divisions. Some of them had come from different leagues. But they've really been sort of pulled together by Pantaleo Corvino, who's a former Lecce sporting director who's returned, who also was at Fiorentina. He's the guy who found Mirko Vucinic, brought him to Serie A for the first time. Some sort of other big names that he sort of introduced to Serie A. I'm now blanking on who they all are, even though I wrote them in a column this morning. But he did a bunch of the sort of famous recruitment that team did, that Lecce team. Okay, yeah, Cristiano Desma, Valeri Bojinov, players like this, players who went on to have very successful Serie A careers. So yeah, they've been a really sort of interesting case in smart signings. They've had some good results against top teams. They drew with Napoli this season. They beat Lazio. They drew with Roma, I think, as well. So they've had some good results against big teams, and they are 13th now. They've got the best defense in the lower half of the table. They're not thrilling to watch. I mean, God, they made this game ugly on purpose, and they succeeded at it. But they got, a great goal from Cisse at the start of the game, another of those new signings. And yeah, they're sort of doing it the old-fashioned way with an old-fashioned manager, Marco Baroni, who's like 59 years old and refuses to ever change his 4-3-3. And his argument is basically, as long as you've got the right attitude, you can get somewhere, and they are.
Yeah, I do think defensively they really know how to sort of, really like tighten you up and neutralize you. And I think there's a lot of effort made in sort of studying the opponent, which is why they always come up with a specific plan. So good on you, Lecce. Meanwhile, I sort of want to mention Roma Verona, because this is an interesting game in the sense that, the Fab Four, we had waited so long for the season to start so we could see Pellegrini, Dybala, Zaniolo, Tammy Abraham, all together. A lot of people were like, yeah, this Roma side is going to be flying. Zaniolo's now gone, obviously. Tammy Abraham hasn't been the Tammy Abraham of last season. Dybala's been great. And I guess so is Pellegrini. But in this game. Both of them were absent. Tammy had to be taken off, unfortunately for him. And, Zaniolo's gone. But what we did have was Spinazzola back with a beautiful back heel and a Sol back in goal. And I just thought that, Verona have been doing really well recently. So there was always a potential banana slip here. But Roma's one of these sides that I feel like we can depend on a little bit more to get results these days, whereas sometimes you just don't understand. Like with Atalanta, I'm just like, okay, maybe they're not a side that we can depend on. But Roma can usually do the job even if it's not always an entertaining fashion.
Yeah, and look, without Dybala to get Sol back and the guy who sort of comes in to fill that gap, score a goal right away is a positive for certain. But I think for sure they also need Dybala back as quick as possible if they want to finish this season as strong as they've been playing recently.
I do. I'm sorry, I can't talk about this game without sort of going into what Mourinho said afterwards. And he just said, they won with team spirit, an incredible spirit of sacrifice, blah, 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 blah. I'm just disappointed people do not give these lads the credit for the work we are doing in very difficult circumstance. Either they don't understand or they don't want to understand. I'm grateful. You in general in the media are not helping. The others are phenomenons. We win because we are lucky or we have set plays, blah, blah, blah. But it's basically he's having a go at the fact that we're not applauding the players. And he said, I already get a lot of applause, so it's not me that needs the nice words. These lads, they need praise. You brought back Karsdorp, who you called a traitor. Okay, are you joking? 3 weeks ago, you said Solbakken doesn't understand tactics. Okay, he doesn't know the difference between a 5-3-2 and a 3-4-1-2. Then you talked about Belotti, who said he's suffering from a disease where he has to have 4 or 5 heel touches. He has to score with his knee, as in this is not him. He wants to be this playmaking wizard and, have this beautiful goal when you just need him to score. You've shoved each one of these under the bus and now you're saying, hey, guys, go and praise them. Lead by example. Show us the way. We shall follow in the media. But if you're throwing them under the bus and you're bringing back Karsdorp and saying, well, he has been out. You threw him out. What are you talking about? I really feel like this guy, I have to say, though, for me, he just makes Serie A so interesting. But there is a part of me that listens to these interviews and is like, you're kidding, right? You're the first person to come after your players and now you're saying they need praise. You start!
I'm gotta agree, Mina. He can drive you potty, but I want him in Serie A because it's fun to watch.
Me too. I love him. Me too. I just feel like right now, I really need him in Serie A because he's just keeping me entertained, to be honest with you. I'm not entirely sure Roma Verona would have been my favorite thing to watch, but I watch because of Mourinho. So I'm certainly glad for him to be there. But otherwise, is there anything that we have mentioned that we haven't gone into? Obviously, we've done a little bit of a podcast on the Champions League as well as the Europa League. We have the Champions League. You'll hear from us midweek. Nikki, you have to run though, don't you?
I've got a plane to catch. So yeah, I'm gonna dash.
They're throwing you out of the country.
They are. They are. So I'm going to wrap things up for us. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We'll do some proper shout outs on the next episode, but I am tight for time now. Thank you again to Patrick for joining us. That was great fun. You can find Mina and I on Twitter at Nicky Bandini, at Mina Rzouki. You can also find Patrick on Twitter, and I don't have his handle in front of me, so I'm not actually sure what his Twitter handle is. But if you search Patrick Kendrick, he's on there and he's great. He has lots of great opinions. He's very sort of good follow on Twitter as well. You can subscribe to Serie A Chronicles on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram. And we'll see you all in midweek with some voice notes from the Champions League games. All right, gang. See you later. Bye.
Safe journey, Nikki. I know you have to run.
But yeah, I better dash and we'll chat about voice notes and everything later.
Napoli once again have pressed well. Amrabat took his eye off the ball. This is Baldanzi. Caputo, Cambiaghi! The mistake is punished, and how? Injured in the reverse fixture, Cambiaghi scores this time against Fiorentina. Amrabat, the villain of the piece, but the Azzurri shifted it quickly and made the home side pay.